All right. Well, welcome everyone to the weekly Wrangle. I'm excited to be joined by the one and only Jeremy Hardin. Jeremy is a veteran in the industry with an incredible amount of experience in different roles and fun things that he's been a part of. Some of the roles you may know about, or some of the productions, would be things like The Dark Knight, the Harry Potter films. He's also been a writer. He's even, I'm looking over here at the IMDb, been a bus driver actor. Is that correct for Red Sparrow?
Train driver.
Train driver. That's
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
So a man in many hats, and more importantly, he's a great guy. And I've had the pleasure of working with him on a couple of CG Forge projects. And so anyway, welcome, Jeremy. It's great to see you, man.
Thank you. Likewise, it's a pleasure to be here to see a familiar face and to talk about cool projects. It's fun. It's fun. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, speaking of cool projects, I mean, with all of these different projects that you've been a part of, looking back, what's one of them that stands out as one of the most enjoyable projects, one of the most fun things you've ever done? And what made it stand out?
So obviously, it's a tricky question because you love everything you work on. We love everyone near us. We have no favorites. And the other thing I'll sort of caveat and say is I'm very lucky to have worked as part of a team. All of these films are a massive team effort. So even when you get into post-production and we're doing visual effects, there is a huge component of, there's no one superstar who's doing it all. Very happy with some of the things that have come up, but definitely a team effort. So I think the satisfaction for me falls into two categories. You do have things like The Dark Knight or Red Sparrow, where it wants to be photographically realistic, and we don't want the viewer thinking, this is a CGI beat. This is this needs to look like the photography, whether it was shot on IMAX or an RE camera. And it's a gauntlet thrown from a CGI and a visual effects perspective to have the work sit next to something that, is photographed in IMAX format, right? And it's going to be projected taller than a building. So I think there's a certain satisfaction in that gauntlet thrown of, every pixel counts, and looking at that in something like Dark Knight and Red Sparrow. And then particularly when there are CGI beats, obviously we can't go too much into that, but there are CGI people, places, and things that the audience has no idea, which, testament to the teams involved. So happy to have been a part of that. But at the same time, I think when you do get to do something fantastical, like Thor: The Dark World, where Asgard goes from kind of a minor set piece in the first Thor film to we're going to have a big car chase equivalent, flying car chase through Asgard, seeing everything in focus in the big screen. And so getting to be a part of the sort of MCU design process and work with incredible artists and art directors to realize the fantastical is just super cool. Odin's palace, when we were talking about the metal, what it was made of, because it had to be massive, but it had to be kind of look golden. And if you put in the real figures for gold, it looked kind of too orange. And then if you kind of put in, other real figures for metal, it looked, creatively incorrect as well. So we were using a physics-based system at the time to simulate metals. So we had to plug in some fake numbers for something that doesn't exist and kind of invent a metal for Odin's palace. And that's a cool thing to be a part of, to be asked to do. Like, can you come up with a different metal that doesn't exist? Sure, yeah, that would be great. That would be great. So I would say not necessarily like one thing stands out, but I love the gauntlet thrown aspect of the challenges of photoreal or something that no one has seen before, and being a part of the team that gets to bring those things together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like on one hand, you have this realism, you have this, almost like this, we're trying to go undercover to make everything seamless and transparent, which is a fun game in itself. But then on the opposite side of that spectrum is we're going to be in everyone's face with how CGI and how fantastical this is, but in such a cool way. in such a way where we're literally building worlds from scratch. And yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun to have both of those challenges in there and whatnot. And during those productions, so I've seen that you were a VFX consultant, a VFX supervisor, a lighting artist. What are some of the different roles that you have floated around in with these productions?
So it's a really good question. I one of the when you start at a sort of smaller facility or more of an advertising or game animation or cutscene place, you wear a lot of hats and you get to act as a generalist. And I loved that because you get to be exposed to all aspects. You get to find what your strengths are, and you get to learn from incredible people that is their strength. So it really ups your game to be around incredible artists, but still operate on a whole shot level. When you get into some of the larger facilities like a DNEG or an ILM or something like that, in order to scale and to do thousands of shots on a project, obviously they need to hyper specialize. So if you're working in that kind of team, you want to be able to do one thing, lighting, really, really well, and then understand the people on either side of you. So a really great lighting artist, for example, has a very good understanding of look development and shaders, because lighting is reacting to those. And when you're lighting, you'll get a client note or a supervisor note that says, I want it to look more wet. And it's a lighting thing. So if you aren't aware of how the shaders interact with that, and then you're not able to address that note, and it becomes challenging. Deadlines become challenging. And then likewise, obviously from lighting, knowing how we're handing things to compositing is super valuable, because we don't want to hand over a set of a package that is impossible for them to address notes. So I find value in the sort of generalist model and the hyper specialization. And then it's just knowing how best to interact, kind of let go of other things. If you're used to being a generalist, let go of that modeling, let go of that rigging, and let experts in those fields do their bit and just shine at what you're focused on. And then if you do sometimes you do get to troubleshoot. So you're lighting, and the director or the client or the supervisor is like, why isn't this working? And then you get a really cool moment of working with your compositor, working with your look dev artist or your build team to come up with a creative solution. So when I'm talking with people about the various roles, for me, that's what it comes down to. If you're sort of wear a lot of hats, being realistic that you do some things better than others. I'm not a great character animator. So whenever I'm in a generalist role, if a character animation thing comes up and it's much more than a walk cycle, I do suggest that we get someone who's more skilled than myself, in that particular skill set. And then being willing to hyper specialize if we're working on a larger scale production in a larger scale facility, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah. And it really reminds me of one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about lately. And that is, I feel like one of the top qualities of success for any artist is the ability to get outside of yourself as an individual, and really empathize with the team, and really kind of keep that perspective of, I am right now in this role. This is what I'm doing. And that can change. Like you said, sometimes it's more of that generalist role. Sometimes it's more of a specialization and you have to let things go. But I feel like being able to get outside of one's own ego and being able to just tap into that group mentality is just crucial for all things. And my next question here is all about communication, because I feel like that's why that's really at the heart of that situation, right? One of the things that stood out working with you for a little bit was just how professional the communication is from you. I mean, I can tell that you've had a lot of experience with client notes, with receiving feedback, making changes. And it's one of those things that feel like it just comes with a lot of practice and experience. But for those who don't have a lot of practice and experience and want to communicate well with a client or with a studio, what would be your top recommendations? How do you get in the right mindset for that clear professional communication?
It's a really good question, and I think it's something that is sometimes counterintuitive, particularly from an artist perspective, because we are making something, and by nature of the fact that we're not just doing a bouncing gray sphere, we're doing something different every time. There's a degree of knowns and unknowns for us as creators and artists. So there's a degree of, the more lighting shots I do, the more I have a sense of this is going to take me like 3 days or 5 days, or for a crazy one, like a week or 2 weeks or something like that. But I've, in truth, working on Geostorm or something like that, I've never lit a tsunami crashing into a city before. So it's that degree of, I've got a good sense of what I'm doing artist-wise, but I don't have a perfect sense. And so I think the intuition as artists is to withhold, to not be wrong. And because you don't want to say, oh, this is going to take me a day and it takes 2, and we are all, of course, working under a time constraint, because time and budgets are not infinite. So it's a natural intuition, and something I would never fault any member of the team for wanting to kind of protect and say, I don't know, just leave me alone, let me do it, And
Right.
I'm sure I've said the words at some point in time, like, you're slowing me down by asking. But that actually is a critique in and of itself that we can take on board of, why did they need to ask? If they, so it is their job, if it's a producer or a supervisor or a client, it is their job to take the output from what I am doing, and they depend on it for their role. So they have someone asking them, when is it going to be there? So they're only asking something that they need to know for their role. And for me, the moment someone asks a question that I haven't anticipated, it tells me that I have, being critical of myself, I have failed to communicate to maximum effectiveness. I like to know, when we're working together, I like to know that, you're expecting a communication at a certain time. And I like to, if I can, with my, with my resources, anticipate that and get that information to you, because you have a job to do. And
Right.
Likewise for anybody that I'm working with professionally. So it's sort of, to summarize, I think accepting the artist's intuition as an artist to, I don't know exactly how long something's going to take because this is unique, but I appreciate that other people need this information. An estimate will be better than silence. Do you agree with that? Do you find that as well in your
do.
many tasks?
Yeah, and I've run into the same thing before. It's like, hey, Tyler, we need this whole scene shaded. And then, how long is it going to take? And then, like, I don't know. I've never lit or never shaded these things before. If you throw in a wicker basket, it's going to definitely throw me a curveball or, whatever the specifics may be. And that's the hard thing, too, is because CGI is so detailed that it's very, it's almost very concerning, or it's almost fearful as an artist to be like, yeah, it's going to take 3 days, because I know through experience that I'm going to probably run into something that is unexpectedly difficult. Like, let's say the wicker basket situation or whatever it may be, right? Something where at first glance, it may not look difficult or it may not seem like a big deal. But then once you start getting into it, you're like, oh my gosh, this thing, I could spend a whole week studying wicker baskets or whatever it might be. But yeah, I think that's a great example too of how it goes back to, if your mindset is about the team and it's about the group, you're going to understand people in a better way that is appropriate for their role in the whole production. So as an example, if you're someone who has a hard time getting outside of yourself and thinking about the team and thinking about others, when someone comes to you and says, hey, when's this going to get done? That's going to feel like someone's just breathing down your neck and trying to give you a hard time. Like, hey, get off my back. Like, why are you pressuring me, right? But if you're someone who has that perspective of, hey, the reason why they're asking is because the client's asking them and because they need to set realistic expectations, they need to set budgets, they need to provide them some kind of timeline. And it's really part of this bigger picture. Once you realize that, all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's not the person breathing down my neck. This isn't personal. This is just a functionary part of how this system works. And then from there, I think it's a lot easier to stay cool-headed, to provide a range perhaps of expectations, and to kind of go from there. And I think as well, you brought up a good point where it's like, if you don't know, it's okay to say, I don't know yet. I got to maybe itemize some of these things in the scene. Give me 20 minutes. I'll come back and, I can give you a very specific timeline, or I can give you a rough estimate right now. And I think just being realistic about when you do know something and when you don't know something is a big deal. And it's not a failure if you don't know something. I think oftentimes,
and more of a concern if you come across as knowing everything, because of inevitably at some point in time, no matter how much of an expert we are, there is a limit to our knowledge. So I'm always wary of a situation where there's a team or someone who won't say they don't know when they don't know, because that's just a pitfall waiting to happen, to be hiding things that could be a problem we run into, if that makes sense.
Well, and as a producer, you would want to know where are the areas that contain risk and where are the areas that do not contain risk. And if someone is just, hey, everything's fine, don't worry, everything's fine, don't worry, then you don't know where that risk is. You don't know where the potential failure point might exist, where it's going to take a little longer than expected. And then the translation of that is it's harder for me to set realistic expectations for our clients. And then that has that chain effect. But yeah, it all goes back to just, I think, having the humility to just be like, hey, me individually is not as important as the team right now in this situation, and kind of going from there.
And can I also add, I mean, for whatever it's worth, life hack that, so there was a supervisor that I noted, and this was in the sort of 2010s, was always, I mean, we knew the same things. They were years ahead of me career-wise, but we knew the same things. We had all the same skill sets, but somehow they were always a step ahead of me. And they were answering those questions for the client and for, other supervisors. They were just on it. And I kind of, studied how we know the same things. We have the same skill sets, a lot of the same strengths and the same weaknesses. How are they just better? And I'm not joking. They got in earlier. So VFX is a thing that is very kind to, you worked late, come in, we're not an 8:30 at the desk kind of job, because, we might be staying past 5:30 to get a shot done. So it's a forgiving morning start process. But what this person did, which, I tried to take on board for myself, is the person who arrives earlier is able to answer those production kind of questions for how long things are going to take. So even though I might not know to the perfect detail for the client exactly how long something is going to take, I'm not surprised by the question, and then my back is not put up and my feathers aren't ruffled by being asked. I know that this day someone's going to ask, but if I get in at 9:30 or 10 o'clock and start working from there, I'm chasing the day. And I know it sounds silly, what that person did, which was, a great thing for me to take on board, was get in before everyone else, get the answers to the questions that might come up during the day. And then as people are coming in, when time is kind of taken up by all of those meetings, we're able to interact with those questions in a way that is prepared. And it's silly, but getting up a little bit earlier was a surprising way of interacting with that.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that's a really excellent point. It's a great way as well of keeping a cool head. And I feel like that's such a huge part of working in production as well, is how can you maintain a cool head? How can you prevent yourself from fizzling out? As an artist, as someone in production staff or whatever it may be, it feels like because everyone's in the pressure cooker, getting ahead and that literally means just starting the day with almost this kind of meditation, if you will, of here's what's coming up, here's what I'm going to expect, without all of the noise and without the pressure on you, just for a minute, makes a huge difference with that cool head. Yeah,
And
that's a
I
great
think
point.
that the teams that I've worked with would probably agree where, in my early supervision career, which are all on IMDb. So, I can see that film, the crew that I worked with did not necessarily get the most out of working with me because I hadn't yet, copied that brilliant individual and preparing to communicate with people that reported to me, but also people that I reported to, keep the communication flowing in all directions. And then in later, films that I was supervising, the response from the crew to myself is more positive. So, I'll know where I sit with people in when I sort of worked with them in my career. Like early supervision, probably didn't make as many friends because I was learning how to communicate. And then, in the later supervision things, I've had some really good relationships from artists, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes perfect sense. It's something that is practiced and sounds like something you just have to kind of learn the hard way. And well, not necessarily. I mean, you can learn from other people, and you can learn just by being strategic and playing smart. It sounds like in a lot of ways too. So I guess for people that are in production right now, maybe not necessarily people that are brand new or aspiring to be in production, if they're having a hard time establishing healthy communication, I feel like sometimes that has to do with the way that we communicate up front with other people. So as an example, like if you're starting a new job and you're starting with a new team, how do you set clear expectations ahead of time to ensure that there are no, I guess, there's no heartburn later on for uncommunicated expectations? And what does that look like? If you were to start with a new team, how do you establish that professionally?
It's a really good question, and it's one that, of course, we hit over and over again anytime we work with a new team. So, I mean, you and I several years ago hadn't worked together, and so we had to find the rapport with each other to be able to kind of respect that we know things, you know things that I do not. I know things and bring things to the table that are beneficial to you, and so it's sort of trying to find the shorthand that establishes rapport of kind of this isn't my first rodeo. It's a terrible expression. I don't, I've never been involved in rodeo, but it's not my first project. So I am bringing something to the table, and very quickly I'm also asking, please tell me what I don't know that you know. So because we are going to collaborate the most effectively if I don't think I know it all, but I am clear on what I am bringing expertise wise. I've done a whole lot of lighting, from practical photography, still photography, moving photography, and CGI, real and digital lighting. So, I try to establish in a new team that I'm happy to discuss lighting. Here's some of my background if it's relevant. So I'm not sort of bragging, but I'm offering up the expertise. And then obviously if that is not, if it's felt that the lighting is covered, then that's not a hill I die on. I'm not sort of, I'm the lighting person, because like you say, we are trying to accomplish things as part of a team. So it's not about my ego. So I guess if I were to summarize the how to sort of jump into a new team, it is almost like a team building exercise of, if you're all moving something to an end goal, find out where best I push. Do you know what I mean? Like if I pushed best writing Python, cool. I love Python. I'll do that. If I push best doing some, Houdini proceduralization, great. That's so fun for me. So I think if we love what we do, if we love being part of the team, film, advertising, games, content creation, YouTube, I mean, the world is so creative at this point in time. And if we enjoy that, I'm just glad to work as part of a team and contribute anything I can. And if I'm responsible for that team, so if I'm a supervisor or, you know, in some sort of leadership or management role, then that obviously becomes, I need to know what you do and what you do and what you do to make sure that I don't have the star of the show, you know, in terms of that aspect, the greatest effects artist in the world, doing dust hits, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need their brain concocting something that's venom-esque and crystalline and stuff that has never been seen before. And if I've got them doing footprints and dust hits, then I haven't leveraged that team, which leaves them feeling unsatisfied. They go home and say, I'm the best simulation artist in the world, and I'm doing, you know, bullet squibs on brick walls, you know, something that there's a preset for, and I'm doing 100 variations of this, and there's already a preset for it. Why am I doing this? And so that means that I haven't succeeded in communicating with that team. So so I guess I've already summarized the question. I'll be I'll be a little bit indulgent and re-summarize to say, depending on where I'm coming in on the team, I make sure that whoever is responsible for the team knows I'm willing to push. I'm willing to push the cart. I'm willing to get us over the finish line at wherever that's best. And if I'm responsible for getting the team over the line, I make sure I know the strengths of everyone involved so that we are all operating at maximum satisfaction, creativity, and efficiency for budget reasons. When you're on budget and people are fulfilled, everybody wins, everybody's happy, you know?
Yeah. Well, and one thing that came to mind when you mentioned all that was just the candidacy you have to have with yourself on, I'm good at this, I'm bad at that. And I feel like, because I think a lot of people are in this very much like aggressive fighting mentality for work, sometimes that candidacy, it gets lost a little bit, right? It's like, oh, I could do anything you want. Oh, I could be this, I can be that. And it's not necessarily a honest look at your capabilities. And I think sometimes when people do that, they'll end up in a situation where they're not put in the right spot for where they really are. A good example is, hey, you know, I could be a lead. I can do this, right? And at some point, you got to make that brave jump and say, yes, I'm a lead, and then I'm going to do this, right? Even if you don't have all the details figured out. But I think some people, they look at like the next level as like, that's what I always have to go for. That's what I always have to do, right? And I always have to be aggressive towards that next tier, because maybe they want more money or become more prestige, whatever it might be. But again, it's thinking about oneself, and it's not thinking about the production. And I think that's it's. I don't know. I feel like that's been an issue many times in production, where it's like you want that transparency, that honesty, so that people are in the right spots doing the right things. And have you found that when that doesn't happen, it creates this ripple effect later on where it's like, oh man, now I got to shift up these people, and it becomes hectic, like in the middle of things happening? Has that happened in production, or is that something that fortunately gets ironed out up front quite often?
So I think, and this is where the benefit of having a little bit of experience on a few different types of projects and scales of projects comes in, because it absolutely happens. It happens on every project, because we're dealing with never are we just making exactly Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but in 3D. Never are we just reproducing, you know. So, I mean, maybe if you are one of the lucky or unlucky artists, depending on your point of view, who sort of go back and re-edit Star Wars to add new CGI to, you know, old effects, maybe that person is doing the same thing over and over again. But the rest of us, it's, you know, it's not Venom 1, it's Venom 2, right? It's a new thing. It's so in that unknown means that it will always reveal something that's not a good, technologically or personnel or creatively. It will reveal problems, and I think most things are solvable. And the experience that, you know, we gather from a sort of leadership perspective is knowing when it's not, and knowing when to make that call. And that can be software wise, where, we're going to do this bit in Mantra because we know Mantra, right? We're going to not do Solaris. So we're just going to keep it in. And there may come a point where that call is no longer working. It's time to pivot. And, unfortunately, that happens with people. There are people who, who for whatever reason don't get satisfaction from working with you or with me or me with them, and that can come out in an interpersonal dynamic. And in those cases, I've had conversations of people that I still respect to this day. So I'm not saying I'm not downplaying their skill. If anything, they were very, very senior Houdini effects people that I have worked with that kind of, as the pressure mounted, said to me, they are not going to work for these deadlines because they are unrealistic, And I'm in a position of, I respect them. I respect their skill. They were a supervisor for me. So I was a CG supervisor on that particular film, and they were an effects supervisor. So a whole lot of people, depending on the setups that they would be creating for fluids and destruction. So we go into a screening room and we have a very respectful, and this is where the practice that you and I have to have a very respectful conversation, not of, I can't believe you're refusing to meet these deadlines, but rather the film needs to get delivered. The deadlines are fixed not by me, but by other people. So are we going to be able to compromise on what is a realistic milestone or schedule? And are you going to be able to work to that compromise, or is that actually a lost cause right now at the outset? And they said it was a lost cause, and I respect that. And they stopped working on the film, and we got another effects supervisor in who probably might not have been as skilled as that individual, but we were able to collaborate. So there are times where, if we're honest, we respect each other and we have candid conversations about what can give and what cannot give. In that case, I couldn't go back to Fox say, all right, Fox, those big fluid sims you wanted to do, nope, not gonna. We're gonna deliver those later. That it has happened.
Yeah,
that's on me. So yeah, sometimes they happen, and then that's our goal, that they're respectful conversations where we're all adults. We're not talking at people, and hopefully we can end up, at seeing each other in public later and tip of the hat, say hello, and not have any hard feelings. Sometimes that's not successful, but I think that's what we can strive for.
Right. And at the end of the day, I think it's all about, trying to aspire to the ideal. It's not always possible to have everyone aspiring in the same way to an ideal or to whatever it may be. But yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Moving on to a different topic here. I've been thinking about something recently, and I guess this is somewhat similar to what we were just talking about, where when I think about people's expectations when they're aspiring to join the world of VFX, I've been lately trying to determine whether or not people's expectations are realistic or unrealistic in both a negative way or a positive way. So as an example, when you go online and you read a lot of stories from folks that, well, maybe just got burned out by a recent project or whatever, and it's very much a tone of like, run for the hills, don't join VFX, it'll ruin your life, blah blah blah, right? And just I'm sure we've all seen that side of the coin. And especially because lately there's been a rather sharp downturn in the industry, I feel like that negative expectation has grown to a fair degree. But is that realistic? And is that something that is overblown or perhaps a temporary thing? I don't know. When you look at people that are trying to aspire to join the industry, do you think their expectations are realistic or not? What does that look like for you?
So it's a really good question. It's obviously very relevant for the time that we're experiencing right now in the industry. And as you and I have talked about, off recording, I'm fortunate to be lecturing in the computer animation, the National Center for Computer Animation in the UK at Bournemouth University. So, I'm investing, personally and professionally in these future VFX supervisors, who are wanting to get into the industry as a career. So I'll first say that I'm on the internet. I'm aware of the internet. I have seen Reddit, for example. And if I were to read half of what is said on the internet about VFX, I'm pretty much just enraged at all points in time, because either people are saying CGI sucks, which, come on, stop that. No, it doesn't. People are saying that less now, but for a while that was CGI was everything, and so on. So there's a lot of negativity for VFX artists from outside of the industry. Why are you ruining films and so on? And then you've got these veterans who are very vocal from within the industry, who are in LA and who have 40 years of experience, or they're in the VFX hub. They've worked for every major visual effects house. They've sort of been the nomad lifestyle, and deadlines are hard for everyone of every age. So as we progress through it, things stop being so. The first time you're working on a Harry Potter film, you're like, oh my goodness! But obviously, when you're on your 10th film or your 20th film and you're hitting another deadline, and it's the same kind of notes, and you feel like you've seen it all before. I think that a lot of what is said toward people who are getting into the industry, particularly on the internet, is very a vocal minority being very vocal. And so obviously with my trying to, help new artists get into the industry, that is not my point of view. If it was my point of view, I would not be trying to help new artists get it, working with you in CG Forge and doing that. So the truth is, for me, if all VFX stopped like right now, there is now no need for VFX. Truth be told, I started doing CG not knowing it was a career, doing it as a hobby because I love it. And so obviously we want to, we want to have a career in the creative industries, but if a person is getting into this to be a creative, and if we're talking about being a creative on a film, I'm very lucky to have worked on some of the big blockbuster films where some of the greatest VFX talent, people who have won Academy Awards and, for VFX, and learn from them. And I wouldn't trade a second of that, because what an opportunity to work on photography shot on IMAX by Christopher Nolan, and to learn from, Paul Franklin and Andrew Whitehurst and, Rick Leary and some of the amazing people that I've been able to be, on a project with. Yeah. So incredibly fulfilling. I think, of course, the career aspect of it, we have seen booms and busts and a cycle of supply and demand. When the writer's strike a decade ago happened, there was a shrinkage of the industry, and that meant uncertainty for people's careers. So I, experienced that uncertainty, and a lot of other people did as well. There is a degree of uncertainty. So but I would say, and I'd actually be curious to hear what you think as well, the current technology situation with AI and large language models and stable diffusion and Comfy UI and the many, many incredible technological upsets that are happening with this technology are absolutely having an effect on knowledge jobs, not exclusively VFX or filmmaking. So we all as a society are coming to grips with this new technology and the democratization of complex tasks by being able to speak in plain language. You used to have to be able to
Mhm.
program to do that, and now you can speak plainly and get the same result that you would have to have been a programmer for 10 years. So there's a democratization, and that is going to have an impact on many knowledge-based industries. And so it goes back to, if you're an artist and you are wanting to be, getting into the vision, you're in university or you're in a program like CG Forge and you're learning, the world is dealing with new technology, but do it for the love. And if you're
Mhm.
doing it for the love and knowing that there are still jobs within it, you can assess your situation realistically. So when
Mhm.
my goal for, when I'm teaching students, I'm trying to give them not junior artist level skills, but I'm trying to have them learn from my mistakes. I know that sounds cliche,
Yeah.
so that they can enter the field with an advantage, among their peers. I want them to do well among their peers. So yes, there may be, a certain number of hundreds of thousands of jobs now rather than what there were when Avengers Infinity War was coming out. But if they are competing within that, they're prepared and they love it, then I would like to see them do well in that competition. And the other thing I'll say, be very brief because that was a long-winded answer. We as part of this is true for camera people. I've been very lucky to work with stunt choreographers and set designers and people who are working on productions, on physical productions, on location, and on sets. And they're just like what we're talking about with VFX. They are dedicated. They know so much about what they do. They care so much about what they do, and they're in a similar position of, there is an upset that's happening. We are all in the film and television and games. We're all following markets. So I am excited for the next Harry Potter reboot, the next Batman, the
Mhm.
next phase of the DC universe or the Marvel universe. These, people are critical of, oh my goodness, they're rebooting this again. Man, Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible, whatever number, is
Mhm.
getting those camera people to work. They're getting those stunt people to work. They're getting the set builders to work, and they're getting you and I to be able to work on some incredible things. So the market will
Yeah.
also, the moment there's that big phase, whatever of Marvel, suddenly it will, rather than being too many artists for too few jobs, it will flip as it has
Yeah.
before. I think. I
Yeah.
don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think one of the overarching themes to all of this is trying to take a step back and not just look at being a VFX artist or being in films in isolation to just that industry. Like where are we all at on more of a economic place globally here? Okay, like is the grass really that much greener if you want to go work for a marketing firm? I don't know, selling hearing aids or something, right?
Mhm.
Doing something completely different. The bottom line is that I just don't think economically across the board, most of Western society isn't in a great spot right now.
Mhm.
It's challenging everywhere. And then when you realize that and you look at what a miracle it is that VFX and this form of art is even possible to begin with. Like the fact that we can coordinate this many people to create an art project that people are willing to pay money for is kind of amazing. And it's kind
It's
of
incredible.
it's almost like what is it? It's almost like a feat of mankind in some ways,
Hmm.
honestly. If it just because of how unique and special this is. Um, when you realize that in context, you start, I think, establishing more realistic expectations in some ways. It's like, yeah, I woke up one day and said, I want to be an artist. Okay. In most other artistic fields, what would happen if you woke up and say, I want to be a painter, I want to be a musician, I want to be other types of artist? What you would find is that there's less job stability over there than there is with VFX right now.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think for the longest time, being a VFX artist had this special quality that other artists didn't get to enjoy, which was that there's more opportunity, there's more job potential to make a
Mhm.
living doing this than many other art forms. And then I think perhaps during this era of like all-time peak highs and perhaps like the Marvel movie creation and just like, peak staffing, um, all of a sudden, I think people put this expectation that a VFX job is almost like expected to be there versus
Mhm.
this is an artistic role that is like other artistic roles and it's kind of special right now. But in a way, I think that we're seeing things come back to perhaps a healthier medium of, this is an artistic role. You are an artist, and this is a not a normal job. And if security and a normal job is what you want in life, that is fantastic. Do something that's more down to earth. Go be, a electrician, a plumber, or do something and that's fine. But that has a different path in life. That has a different role, a different place. It has different things that are great about it and different things that are not great about it. And I think that when people don't have realistic expectations at what this thing is, and then it doesn't work out the way that they want it to because they really want it, that it's really not aligned to them as a person, that's where I think you get a lot of heartburn and heartbreak going on.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, a lot of people, they're not. I love what you're saying about the sort of team aspect and the sort of wonder of the world feat that filmmaking, has been for the last few decades. And a lot of the people who have never been in that particular situation may think that they're thinking of it as, I'm going on set and I'm meeting famous people and I'm signing autographs and drinking cappuccinos and all of that.
Mhm.
And so for people who, and I would say I would put you and I in that category of loving the software and what I can make with it, and then getting to see your name in the credits is a fabulous thing. Way after the caterers and way after the dog trainers and all. Right at the bottom.
Yeah.
Getting to see that. So there is an incredible component to it, but we are ultimately, hopefully, as artists, loving the creative aspect of it, because in truth, when you're working on a large project, you're not necessarily going to be shaking hands with and hanging out with famous people. You're getting to learn from incredible minds that have devised something incredible. I mean, some of the stuff, we use software, we see things like Catmull ROM in our software, but these are named after people, and those legends of computer graphics and what Pixar and all of the sort of legacy of the visualization that we do. I think there's also a component of really enjoying being a part of that, the learning from brilliant minds. So look, I'm pro what we do, obviously, a little biased, both from a sort of an artist perspective of we get to make things that no one has ever seen and cannot see. We can make impossible things. We get to do that in a way that a sculptor could not do. A musician cannot play a note that doesn't exist, but we can, Doctor Strange, okay, just as a random aside, but the sort of alternate universe Doctor Strange effects that I think it was Framestore, I believe, or Industrial Light and Magic did. Creative, how it's very rare that I watch something and I think, I don't know how they did that. That setup in Houdini.
I'm glad you brought that up, because for whatever reason, that was actually the specific movie that came to mind when I thought of like, this is like a wonder of the world. Like, how the heck is this even? How does this exist right now? This is insane.
Yeah, and that creativity is inspiring. To I still look at things and get inspired and say, I want to be able to do that. how'd they do that?
Yeah.
And I think as long as that drives us, as long as we look at, and that's sort of career ambition, but that's also just artist ambition. As long as we're looking at things, if you're a musician, you should have a thing you're working on, right? You should have that thing you're still working on a piano or singing, or open mic night. And as a VFX person, a CGI person, I absolutely have things like, I would like to, Doctor Strange, I'm coming for you,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Doing that kind of effect.
Well, and this all kind of goes back to like, if you've lost that spark of motivation, if you've lost that joy that can still exist many years after being part of this industry, by the way, it doesn't have to be snuffed out by deadlines. If you've lost that, then I think that it's not impossible to get that back, and it's not impossible to realign your energy to that and find success. And I think that the minute that you feel like it's childish, or the minute that you feel like it's impossible for that spark to serve you well, I think you're losing your way a little bit as an artist. And it's sad to see that, but I think that I think that's really important, and I think that's the kind of thing that's going to keep you moving on. There's many things that I think rob people of that spark, unfortunately. And that's an interesting topic that, I might try to think about more, like, for future angles. But yeah, it's still there. It's still possible to have that spark, to have it drive you, and it to lead to a place of success. And, you're not going to be living out of a cardboard box if you follow that motivation. And I think sometimes that's this conclusion that people come to that I don't necessarily agree with. So looking towards the future, how do you think this all plays out? I know you mentioned that in a way it's a bit of a pendulum where things have swung on more of a contraction side. I've had the opinion that all it takes is a few more movies to bump up the demand for there to be a lack of supply in artists, and then all of a sudden the dynamic very quickly can shift. Do you find that that's probably the most likely thing that's going to happen? I think AI is making some things more efficient, but I don't know if it's making things efficient to a degree at which it's like cataclysmic for the demand of talented artists. I don't know. How do you see this playing out, this recent downturn?
So obviously it's a question on everyone's mind, and it hits so many industries. So I will limit my thought to the things that I'm familiar with, specifically in the sort of VFX, film and television spaces, because I've got a good understanding of the sort of markets that we're operating in, particularly within the UK. So every new creative technology tends to democratize creativity. And so we touched on this earlier. And when we democratize creativity, we shift the monetization value of that. So obviously the camera changed what one could get paid painting portraits, because one could take a photo. The printing press democratized language. Each one of these brought a new kind of creativity to more people, and that did shift the industries that these creative aspects are happening within. So AI is, of course, democratizing. People can create images. What I was saying about you and I used to be the only kind of people who could make things that no one's ever seen, and now there are tools to create things that no one's ever seen without knowing Houdini or being a coder. So anytime we see that kind of democratization, that will shift value. It absolutely is already shifting value with Netflix, and with Netflix using generative AI in shows and sort of publicizing that. At the same time, you've got Disney suing Midjourney. I believe Warner Brothers is also suing Midjourney. So these things are shaking out in some interesting ways. For me, I think that the big impact I anticipate is the route into the industry is absolutely going to be shaped by this, because the route into the industry used to be, so if you're in a 3D graphics side of things, you might be expected to do some camera match move. And you have your modeling reel, or you have your texturing or your effects reel, but we really, every shot that it has CG has match move. We need a lot of people working on this. And so, that was a good entry level position. And then maybe you'd move out of match move into a department. And similarly for compositing on the 2D side, roto, which is essentially for people who don't do compositing, that's just tracing people to, if they weren't filmed in front of a green screen or blue screen and we need to extract them from the footage, that's a tracing process, frame by frame. And that served as a good entry level position to get into the compositing side of the visual effects field. And those can be seen as tedious in that it's hard to be creative with match move. You kind of resolve, add some more markers, hand track, resolve, add some more markers, hand track, and so on. And similarly with roto, it's headphones on, listen to some great tunes, and throw some splines down for hours on end. And so those tedious things, now with the democratization of this technology, those things are going away. AI is literally solving some of these solutions. So that means AI is still making things with too many fingers. That will, of course, go away. But at the moment, there are flaws still with AI. And so we need a senior VFX person to rein it in. But then the junior positions of coming in with match move or roto, we don't necessarily on a project need as many of those. So I think that coming into the industry, it would benefit people to know what AI is failing at. And I'll tell you straight away, motion blur is... So someone sent me a video of a photo that was taken of a family member, and it was really cool. They were moving, and if you look at the ripples on the water, the ripples weren't continuing the reflection, and the motion blur was off, localized in a localized way. And so you and I are experts in picking apart an image and looking at what isn't working. What an audience is going to do is they're going to see that on Netflix and they're going to go, well, that looked like crap. That looked awful. And then they're going to lambast it. And then the director's going to be like, oh, I'm not going to use that AI tool anymore. So I think the way we can now get into the industry is still with that modeling reel, that effects reel, that compositing reel. But instead of trying to get in at an entry level position of, I'm going to do roto to trace people, it's I'm using Comfy UI, or I've got a stable diffusion prompt working in Houdini. Bring these tools in and know where they fail, because then with the moment that a director or a client asks you, if you're a freelancer, why does that look fake? And you have an answer, you have their respect, you have their attention, and you probably have the next job.
True.
Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it's absolutely a shakeup, but it is navigable, I feel. What do you think?
I agree. I noticed that anytime there's new technological innovation that shocks people and democratizes creativity, like you said, I think there is a propensity to think that technology doesn't have limitations and it can just keep on going forever. We don't know how fast this thing's going to go. And, I look back perhaps to things in history like when the car was first invented. You don't need horse and buggy anymore. I'll think about how many poor horse and buggy people you're putting out of business. How could you love this new technology when those poor horse and buggy folks are struggling? And it's true, but the thing is that you also had some folks being like, well, in 10 years, we're going to have flying cars, aren't we? And we're going to, we're going to have this and we're going to have that. And so I feel like that happens every time there's a new technology that comes out. And as well, there is a lot of hype that has commercial incentive as well. It doesn't help that you have like NVIDIA, who is at the very forefront of cutting edge AI tech right now. saying that, yeah, it's going to take over the world, join us or die. I mean,
Right.
of
Yeah.
course they would say that because that's going to create more hype for their products that they're creating. And I think sometimes people get caught up in that marketing hype a little bit, and they get caught up in the mindset of this thing's infinite, it's going to overshadow everything. But historically, looking back in the past, things aren't infinite. They do have limitations. And to your point, if you're someone that can show up understanding the technology and what it really is, and not just what the hype says about whatever this is, you have a big advantage. And
Hmm.
I really think that AI in particular is disproportionate in how it affects certain tasks versus others. Like concept artists, it is fairly apocalyptic in some ways, right? But there's still concept artists that are still
Hmm.
working because not the entire job isn't just about making concept art. It's also about how to work with clients, set expectations, do all the things we just were talking about. Even if their job is more efficient, it just looks like maybe more iterations now. Or if AI really is that thing that can help us make movies in 2 months versus 2 years, or just, as an example. Great. I don't see there being a lack of appetite for good movies right now. If you want to give me more good movies, you want to give everyone else good movies, it actually could increase the amount of profit that this industry sees in general, which creates more jobs for people. So in a
Hmm.
weird way, it's like I think new technology and efficiencies should be celebrated because we're already working with an extremely slow medium. And we want to create good movies. That's what it's all about, or good TV shows, or good media productions of some kind. And so, in general, I think that AI should be embraced, just like every new technology that has been embraced in the past, but also viewed with a sense of realistic expectations. And that just means you have to critically think about the limitations and align your skill set to what that actually is.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
agreed. And one thing as well, which will be interesting to see in a couple of years, all of the sort of online AI models are hiding the compute cost. You and I know that
mhm.
compute is a time and budget constraint. So, and for anybody who is not necessarily following what I'm saying, so when we are creating an image and we are doing the process of simulating light and making that image for, in Houdini and Solaris or Mantra, that process, one image could take 10 minutes. It generates heat in the computer, it uses electricity. And if I need to do that at scale, I've got 10 computers, which is 10 times the electricity. And I have seen the power bill change personally and professionally based on how much of this, computing I'm doing to generate images. And a lot of the online AI models are actively obscuring the cost to generate these images and to generate these videos because they want people to they want the hook, right? People to be
Right.
hooked on using it. Eventually, though, they will need to make money. Number one thing, uh, and larger projects tend to operate with a certain degree of confidentiality that cannot operate in someone else's cloud.
Mhm.
So I'm not working on any productions. I'm not speaking for a studio, but as an example that I am not working with right now, Warner Brothers have a vested interest in not putting this in, OpenAI's cloud. They want it on their servers. And the moment things are running on their servers and you see that, oh, I need this many GPUs and this much electricity and this much cooling, and there is a cost associated with it. So right now, there's a bit of a bubble, a hype bubble around the fact that it can do all of this, and it's free. We
Mhm.
know making images with a computer takes time, heat, electricity, and so
Yeah.
much so. I mean, Microsoft is, I understand, has been looking at sort of nuclear power for
Yeah.
AI data centers to power this. So it's a problem that is most people are not aware of. That's kind of waiting down the road. So I'm
True.
completely agreeing with what you're saying. Yeah.
True. Absolutely. Well, it'll be interesting to see how things play out. That's for sure. I think Dev would bring up a lot of good points on that one. Great. So to wrap things up, without breaking any NDAs, what are you up to right now? Anything fun? I know you're up to a bunch of different projects, but yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very excited to be starting a new academic year at Bournemouth University with the National Centre for Computer Animation, lecturing there. I am still involved with the independent production Zombie JJ, which I was acting as producer and a few other roles on that, and still fairly involved with Dark Cosmos Creative, the VFX company that I founded 10 years ago next month. So exciting to
Congratulations.
still be kicking around 10 years later. So keeping all of those things on the go, and obviously working with CG Forge and working with yourself on some cool things, which I'm excited. We've talked about it, but excited for people to be up on some of the things that we're doing together.
We're cooking up a lot of stuff behind the scenes. I know this year has been a little bit quiet on the prairie with CG Forge, but behind the scenes, we're up to a lot of amazing stuff. So, and thanks again, Jeremy, for hopping on. It's great talking with you, man. This was awesome.
Likewise. Always a pleasure. Thank you very much for the time and the very engaging conversation, talking about things that, that we both obviously care a great deal about.
Absolutely. See you guys.